Rock isn't dead. It's in flux.
Hi, everyone. I'm Britt with Rock and Flux, and I am joined today by Kyle Kimball of the band Night Sins. And Kyle, I want to say thank you for being with me here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So let's start off by just kind of giving me your background, how you kind of came up with Night Sins and got started doing that band. And yeah, just like your background on how things kind of began for you.
I grew up playing in punk and hardcore bands since I was like 14 years old, going to like local shows. And maybe I was like 16, and my friend Bob showed me Sisters of Mercy. From that point on, I was like, I want to be in a band like this. And then maybe 2009, I just got a couple friends together, and there it was.
For Night Sins, because you're in several bands,
The
right?
Night Sins. Right now, it's just Night Sins. I've been in a lot of bands throughout the years, but yeah, just kind of focusing on Night Sins for really the first time in maybe since like 2011, 2012.
Because I'm from Philadelphia originally. I'm in Phoenix now, but the way I found you all on Spotify, but it's weird because we have a connection because I went to college with Chris from Born Losers.
Oh, cool.
So whenever I see a band from Philly or anyone from Philly doing anything, like I just think it's cool because I come from that world. And I mean, but you've been in like other Philly bands like Nothing, and then you had Death of Lovers too. So like you have a lot of stuff that you've done in the past. What made you finally decide to solely focus on Night Sins?
It just kind of happened by accident. I was in Nothing for like 10 years, and I just decided I didn't want to tour anymore because Nikki goes relentlessly. And yeah, it's all good with Nikki and Nothing. I actually just saw him last weekend. But I was like, hey man, I can't really do this anymore. Night Sins has always been there, and I feel like I have 6 LPs out now. I've kind of consistently released like a record every couple of years since I started doing it, but it was never like the sole focus. And yeah, I stopped touring, and it was just like, oh, I actually have time to pursue this, like real time to pursue it, instead of just like, oh, I'm in between tours, or, in between making records. So yeah, working on a record right now, an EP, which should be out maybe at the end of this year. Hopefully, we'll see.
Nice. What made you gravitate? Because I mean, the other bands that you've been in, Death of Lovers is more similar, I would say, to Night Sins than Nothing. So, have you always gravitated to kind of like the new wave, dark wave, post punk type of sound? And is that why you've always been doing this?
Yeah, for sure. Even when I was in like the punk and hardcore bands, it was always like I leaned more towards the darker stuff. Like I played in a hardcore band called Salvation, but we were more influenced by like Killing Joke or like Christian Death than maybe like other punk or hardcore bands. Yeah, it was just always into darker, gothier sound, if you want to call it that.
What would you say some of your influences are? So, like, I know you said Sisters of Mercy, but if you had to say like other bands that like really influenced you growing up or as you've honed your sound with Night Sins, who would you say it is?
Yeah, Sisters is a big one. Maybe more industrial type things. We just saw Frontline Assembly a couple weeks ago. That was amazing. Skinny Puppy, like pop music too, Madonna, everything, all things. Yeah, Killing Joke for sure. Depeche Mode, New Order,
I
all
hear a lot of the
the
not a lot, but the Cure is definitely has to be too, especially in your earlier stuff. I definitely hear an influence of that there.
for sure. Yeah, 100%.
And I mean, like listening to I mean, you do have a pretty large discography, and I've obviously been listening to it. You can really hear like as the albums move, like how you've honed your sound. Your latest album, Violet Age, I think is such a cool album. Like there's so many good songs on that album. Can you tell me like the whole recording process of that? I mean, you do this all by yourself, right? So like do you work with anyone else when you're recording or writing, or is it solely are you playing everything and doing all of it?
So My first maybe 4 records I did with Arthur Risk, who's also a Philly guy. So I would do everything. I had like a little digital 8-track and I would play like live drums into it and then like synth and guitar. And then I would bring it to Arthur and I would say, let's make this, but for real. And he would construct the drums for me digitally. And then we would re record everything together. And I did a similar thing with Nick Bassett on Portrait in Silver, the one right before Violet Age. And then I did a similar thing with my friend Josh, where recorded all demos and then I take it there and then we redo it in the studio for real. This new one I'm actually doing completely by myself. Well, it's actually more of a collaborative effort with the band. I've been writing predominantly alone, but we actually collaborate on a track that's going to be on the record, which is pretty neat. I haven't really done that before with Night Sins. It's usually just been me and yeah, a producer helping me. So yeah, it's pretty cool. The 3 other members in the band we wrote together.
Cool. Well, one other question I did notice, so between the Dancing Chrome and then Portrait in Silver, the song Daisy Chain is on both of those, right? And then on Portrait in Silver, it's like it's updated. It reminds me, he almost made it a little, it feels like it's influenced a little bit by Strange Love by Depeche Mode with some of the elements in that song. What made you like re-record it and do it on a second album?
I just wanted to do it again. I just wanted to do it differently. Between doing it with Arthur and then Nick Bassett, it was like Arthur's like sound is like a little grittier, I think, which is amazing too. But then I just wanted a cleaner version. I wanted to like Tears for Fears it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can hear that too. So that brings me to a question, and I'll be very curious to see what your answer is for this. But when I explain to someone, about your band and or your music, and if I were to tell them like what song to start listening to, if I had to give them a song, what would you suggest to tell people to start to listen to if they're brand new?
I would say Violet Age, just because I like to keep it in the present. I do really think it's kind of like a nice all encompassing song. I feel like Night Sense has been like a lot of different things throughout the years, and it still is. I don't pigeonhole myself into any genre. I think it's like a nice overarching Night Sense song.
Let's take a listen to a clip of it.
Little sister, get it right. Save a prayer for me tonight. Whatever turns you on, little brother, just my kind. It's a violent world, but I don't mind. Faithfully, try not catch the new disease when the sunrise cuts inside and we say goodbye. That's the test that follow. Is it me or is it you this time? Heaven waits to swallow all the lonely things that make me come
I think it's great. I love a lot of the stuff that you have on there. And I know you had mentioned that you kind of wanted to take a step back from touring, but you also mentioned that you're working with a band on this new album you're working on. So, do you have plans to tour in the future at all, or do you plan on just maybe playing locally? Like, if you have people and musicians that you're working with, like, what would your plans be with that?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We're playing a handful of shows this year. We have 2 shows with Choir Boy this summer. We're playing a festival in Tampa in October. But yeah, just kind of seeing how things unfold. I'm not really like overly pursuing playing live, but I'm not shying away from it either. Like if a cool thing like Choir Boy, we're friends with them and they asked about playing together and I said, great. We love that band. Yeah, so like if a cool opportunity presents itself, I'll for sure jump on it.
So you are, I mean, it is a lot of obviously like electronic based music. How do you think you would transfer that to a live situation? Like, what do you think? How do you think that would work to try to keep it as close to the album? Or do you not really worry about it sounding like the recorded version?
Yeah, I never really think about it when I'm making a song. And then you have to think about it, of course, when it is time to play live. Yeah, I try to merge the two worlds a little bit. There's like for sure some backing tracks, and then there's live instruments, guitars and bass, and throw some live drums on stage as well, just to keep it a little bit more authentic, give it more of a live feel. But yeah, it's never something I think about until you're like, oh shit, I have to play a show now. I guess we got to figure this out.
Right. Well, and that would be a question that I would have for you too. So you're a drummer, but for Night Sins, you sing. So do you prefer to have live drums for live shows, or would you ever be okay with using a drum machine?
Drum machine's cool. I do. We do. Our drummer Chris plays like a stand-up floor tom and a snare drum. But yeah, I love fake drums. I love 80s sound.
So you wouldn't like you would not if you ever had to, would you just have track drums? Like if you couldn't have a drummer
Sure.
live?
Yeah. Yeah. I've done it before. 100%. Who needs real drums, you know?
As long as it works. Like, and that's the situation. So, do you have any interesting stories from like playing live as this band or really any of your bands where either it's just like an interesting story or like a situation where you had to deal with like something happening and trying to fix it, especially if it's like an electronic situation?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe the first Nights In show I played. I mean, I feel like most people don't know what the hell they're doing when they're trying to do it for the first time, or
Of course.
or the 100th time. You know, it just depends. But I borrowed a drum machine from my friend Arthur. I loaded like the drum tracks onto it, and then there was like a loose connection in one of the inputs, and it just cut out for the entire show. And I had no idea why or what was happening. I thought it was maybe the sound guy was fucking with me or something, but it's just, it's shit's gonna happen, and you try to like suss out as much shit as you can. But I feel like a crap like that's inevitable. Even with like Nothing and other bands I played in, there was always like pedal boards were fucking up or like things were getting unplugged. And it is what it is. That's why it's live, and you try to avoid it, but it's gonna happen. You gotta roll through it.
Right. What's your cat's name? I see I
This
see
is
him or her in
this
the
is Short Round, named after Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
and it's funny. So, I mean, I've listened to your music, but one of the things that made me reach out to you is I actually had someone who listens to this podcast from Australia reach out to me and say, if you can it, like they listed a few bands that they would love to hear episodes with. And you were one of them. Nightsins was one of them. So I was like, well, I like their music. So yeah, I'll reach out to them. So I thought that was kind of cool because, you're from Philadelphia, I'm in Phoenix, and someone in Australia is listening.
What a world.
I know. Shout out to that.
Oh, that's cool.
Um,
I like that.
it's a cool thing about like, I have mixed feelings about streaming. Overall, I'm very positive with it. I do wish it would pay artists better. It just allows you to find so many things and it expands the potential audience that, maybe wouldn't have been possible before. So
Yeah, 100%. I would hope it never distracts from buying a record, but it is cool to just listen to whoever you want, whenever you want.
right. I mean, I would hope not. I feel like music is it has nostalgic elements. It has like emotional things that you just get attached to. And I feel like if you get attached to something enough and you really like something enough, or you just want to support, that person or those people who are creating, something that you like, you'll support that.
Yeah.
I hope, and I think that most people do, especially because vinyl's coming back. And it's interesting. This conversation's come up with other people I've talked to. Also, it's getting harder and harder to press vinyl because there's such a demand for it now. So I've heard that like people are starting to do tapes, and then like CDs are starting to come back. Do you have like an opinion on what your ideal format for printed music is? Is it a CD? Is it vinyl? Like,
It's a vinyl LP just for display purposes. I think it's cool to have a record for listening. I don't know. I'm not some vinyl purist that's going to be like, this sounds better. Honestly, I think CDs probably sound the best, but just for, to have a nice physical copy, definitely a 12-inch record. Yeah.
well, and I mean, you could give more information in that too,
Yeah.
right? And like the
Totally.
artwork
The
and all that
pictures
can
in it.
be
Yeah.
bigger, so
Yeah.
there's a little bit, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, you're based out of Philadelphia. And one thing that I've noticed with just starting this whole website and podcast and everything is that there really is like a scene kind of forming around like the new wave, dark wave type of sound, synth. And a lot of those bands are in LA. How do you feel about like Philly versus LA? For me, from what I've heard, LA audiences aren't necessarily as animated, I guess, or like vocal during performances or things like that as maybe Philly. And I also think that Philadelphia fans, like, if they don't like what you're doing, you're going to know it. But I'd be interested to kind of, gauge your thoughts on being a Philadelphia based musician and if you feel like impacted you at all.
I mean, for sure, it has to have. But in terms of like LA versus like Philly or East and West Coast, I don't know. We played like amazing shows in LA, played amazing shows in Philly. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to like generalize something like that. But Night Since hasn't. We played LA in 2013. We did a tour with Youth Code. So I played LA then. I guess that's 10 years ago. But yeah, Death of Lovers played LA. It was great. Nothing would play LA all the time. But yeah, Philly's been awesome. Played a bunch of shows this year or last year rather. Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak. I don't know.
No opinion.
No, yeah, it's like,
Neutral.
I think it's like you said, sometimes they love it. You have a great show, sometimes not as much, and what are you gonna do?
I just remember like when I was in college and some of the hardcore shows in Philly. I mean, and I guess it's also the genre and everything, but I don't, for that, maybe you can't compare it. But like what I've heard some bands tell me is when they play LA, the crowd, like they think they're being respectful. So it's not like they don't like what they're hearing. It's just that like they wait till the song is over to applaud. Like they don't make
Yeah,
a whole lot of noise and that sort of
they're
thing.
just
So
listening. Yeah, maybe that's
yeah.
the way to enjoy it. I don't know.
Yeah. Everybody's different. What are your thoughts on some of the other so have you, like, worked with any of the other Philly bands that are on Born Losers, like Corinne or Johnny Dynamite or
Played shows with both of them. They're both great. Haven't worked with them, but maybe in the future.
well, and that brings me to my next question too, because I've noticed that, like, a lot of bands will remix each other's songs, or some bands have even put out, like, full albums that are just remixes. Do you have any thoughts on would you ever do anything like that, or do you think you'd ever work with anybody on a remix type of situation?
Yeah, for sure. My friend David, who does a group called Confines out of New York, just remixed the Nights In song. That was really amazing. 80s Baby did a choreographed dance to it. I don't know if you're familiar with 80s Baby on Instagram. You should check it out. But yeah, totally. Anyone I respect what they do. I would love to see what they could do to a Nights In song. Or I until recently, like I told you before, I only I recorded into my little digital 8-track. people would always ask me, they'd be like, can you remix this or can you do something to this? And I'd have to be like, nah, I don't have a computer. Like I don't know how to record like that. But now I do actually. So we'll see. Maybe I can remix someone else's record.
If you had to say who you'd want to work with, like some example other artists or bands, or is there anyone who comes to mind who you'd be like, I would want to trade remixes with them?
Uh Youth Code. That would be cool. Maybe it could happen.
Nice. When you play with Choir Boy, are you playing in Philly with them or where are you playing with
Yeah,
them?
Philly and Baltimore.
Here's another question that I ask everyone who comes onto this show. So the whole concept behind this is that rock isn't dead, it's in flux. And it's very interesting to me to ask people these questions because for me, if I say the word rock, I don't necessarily mean bands like Led Zeppelin, right? Like to me,
Right.
Depeche Mode is a rock band.
Sure.
Some people might not think that, but so I find it interesting to hear everyone's opinions on this. But there's that saying like rock is dead, and I don't think that it is. I just think it's in flux, which just means it's changing and it's different. But I'd be curious what your thoughts would be on whether or not you think it's dead.
Yeah, I don't think it's dead. I mean, I was just touring in a rock band for the last 10 years and yeah, it's certainly not dead. It might not be like popular music anymore, but it's like, I don't know. It might not be on the radio, but Depeche Mode will sell out a stadium in Philly, you know. You said Depeche Mode's a rock band. It's like, sure, yeah. So yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think it's dead either. Maybe in flux, yeah.
Well, and I mean, so you've played shows with Nothing and as Night Sins. Are your crowds do you feel like the crowd is really that different? And are the shows different? Like, have you dealt with any different things from fans or audience members in Nothing than you maybe would have in Night Sins?
Yeah, it's hard to say too because I played like I don't know, maybe 1,000 shows with Nothing, and maybe 100 if that with Night Ends, but probably not close to that actually. So yeah, I don't know. Nothing was a pretty beloved band, and I feel like I haven't really devoted the time and attention to Night Ends to really maybe feel that connection as much, or I haven't played as many shows to really feel that connection with an audience that Nothing had.
Yeah, I understand. I just am always curious because different not that, like Nothing, I mean, they're definitely a rock band, but they're not like crazy, crazy heavy. So, I could probably see some overlap with that fan base too.
Yeah, for sure. I would always have people coming up to me and say, "Hey, I really like what you do with Night Sins at Nothing shows," and vice versa.
Right. Well, that's nice.
Yeah, which is cool.
Do you have like a favorite? I mean, now that you're trying to pull back from touring, do you have like a favorite moment or a favorite story from when you were touring that you like remember fondly or maybe not fondly?
Hmm. One time we played a show in Austin at Psych Fest, and one or more of us fell asleep on stage because we drove all night and were drinking heavily all day, and yeah, someone had to get woken up when they fell into the drum set. So that's my answer for that. But yeah,
That is
Southeast Asia was always amazing to play. Indonesia specifically, kids go crazy there.
cool. How did you deal with like the different cultures, especially the different things in different countries like are not acceptable that are okay here? So how did you all deal with being in those situations?
Uh, I don't know. I don't think it's too difficult. A lot of things are way better other places. Food, people are, I don't know, people are cool in America too. People are cool and they suck everywhere. You know what I mean?
It's very interesting, especially, I mean, like I can't even imagine going on a tour and being in a different country because it's like already mentally grueling enough as it is and physically. And then you're so far away from home, somewhere like Indonesia. So I totally get why you would want to take a break and kind of pull back from all that. So
Yeah, it's grueling.
yeah, for sure. So any other things that you would want listeners to know about Night Sins? Anything? So you have an album coming out. Well, you're working on a new album that you're hoping is going to come out by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Can you tell listeners what to expect from that album? Is it going to be similar to Violet Age, or is it going to be like something that throws them for a loop and is completely different?
It'll be similar to all nights and stuff, but yeah, I would hope it doesn't throw anyone for a loop, but it's for sure all over the place. It's kind of like most of the records I do, you'll hear a lot of different things in it, which is always something I try to do. I don't like strive for any sound or song. I write what I want to hear essentially, and however it comes out, it comes out. And I hope people do enjoy it though.
When you're writing an album, where do your songs come from? Like, because some of your lyrics are kind of like thought provoking, and they have dual meanings and representation of things. Like, it's not necessarily like you could take your own feeling from it or interpretation of it. Do you write based on experiences? Like, what makes you create a song, and the different songs that you decide to put on an album?
Definitely from personal experience, and then you take from literature, history, stories from people, other people, your own life. You pull from a million different areas, and you know,
Right. Because like a song like Kill Like I Do, like obviously you're not killing people.
no,
So it's not like
it's a metaphor.
exactly. Yeah. And you have a lot of that in your music. So that's why I was just asking that. I was curious where some of that comes from.
Yeah, that one's pretty personal. It's about overindulging, especially in drugs and alcohol, and trying to keep it all in check and control, and you know, just kind of make it through the day without causing too much harm on anyone, including yourself.
Yeah. That song turned out really well. It's really cool.
Thank you.
And I think, like I said, I think that whole album is really cool. So I appreciate you coming and talking with me today. And again, like, is there? So I know we were talking about this just a moment ago, but is there anything else that you want people to look for other than your new music that you're probably going to be releasing?
Yeah, that's new music. Maybe some more concerts, maybe a tour. We'll see. We'll see how everything unfolds. But yeah, just hope to be more active in general, whether it's just like more consistently releasing music or performing, whatever it is. I want to keep creating in some capacity.
And you can be found Night Sins on Instagram.
Yep.
That's your handle. Yep. And streaming on Spotify, all the platforms. So if
Mhm.
they want to listen to your music, they can go there. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kyle. I appreciate you being here. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, it was great to meet you. Thank you for having me.